Chapter 7, Crispin Rice, 7:27 p.m. Crispin can hear the thud of Grizzly's backside and shoulders slamming into him, carving out space beneath the basket. This deep into the game, there's hardly any pain attached to it anymore. Crispin's body is nearly numb from the abuse. That just makes him even braver. It's like staring down a dentist's drill with your mouth full of Novocaine. Those extra 30 pounds of muscle on Grizzly are still doing the job, but they've lost most of their biting sting. Then, bracing for another collision, Crispin feels his left sneaker slide out from underneath him. A slick sweat spot on the floor gives Grizzly all the advantage he needs. Crispin goes even more off balance with a subtle hip from Grizzly, and the Spartans get the ball into their center's huge paws. Crispin hustles back into position, putting his arms straight up in the air to defend against Grizzly's short jumper. Their chests barely bump together as the ball caroms off the rim. The ref whistles Crispin for a foul, his fourth of the game. One more and he's gone, with no one else near his size on the Trojans' bench for a replacement. On the sideline, Coach Kennedy goes ballistic at the ref, screaming, "He's standing straight up! He's entitled to that space! Look at him!" Crispin freezes in place, arms over his head, pleading his case. "How is this a foul? Tell me, how?" But the ref walks away, ignoring them both. Grizzly sinks the first of two free throws, giving the Spartans a 70-69 lead. Then Kennedy calls a timeout, pounding his right palm on top of the extended fingers of his left hand to make a T, as if the ref's head was on a chopping block between them. Inside the Trojans' huddle, Kennedy calms himself enough to call the next offensive play. Then he turns to Crispin and says, "Don't worry about fouling out. I don't care if I have to send even a midget out there to take your place. Step up to every challenge. You don't even want to lose backing down and have to carry that around with you. There's a minute 32 on the clock, but I promise you, life is a lot longer than that, so stand tall." "I won't sidestep a thing, Coach," says Crispin. "I'll take it all head on." As the Trojans walk back onto the court, their cheerleaders are performing aerobatics. Crispin sees Hope smiling for the crowd, standing on the shoulders of a pair of muscular guys from the pep squad. Then they toss her high in the air with her pom-poms waving before she lands softly in their arms. March, 3 weeks ago. Flying Sushi. That was the name across the front of Crispin's helmet as he fastened his chin strap and then revved the throttle high. He could feel the vibrations running up his spine and the horsepower surging through his body. Then his heel hit the kickstand. He pulled away from the restaurant with 2 full orders bungeoned in behind him. As he took off through the streets of Troy, balancing his 6-foot, 10-inch frame on that red moped scooter, he never felt more like a giant, sitting on top of the world. The Trojans had just won their first 2 NCAA tournament games, just 4 shy of a national championship. They'd arrived back on campus the night before with nearly the entire student body cheering for them. There was a wild celebration at the fountain with the Trojan statue on the quad. Everyone was dressed in red. There were banners and bottles of beer right out in the open, and the Trojan band played the school's fight song over and over. And when Crispin locked lips with Hope, people started chanting, "Hope of Troy! Hope of Troy!" Crispin was beat tired now. He'd gotten up early for classes and spent half the day catching up on missed assignments. But working the 4 to 8 o'clock dinner shift meant good tip money. He could pocket maybe $60 delivering for the only Chinese-Japanese takeout place in the city. Crispin couldn't afford to pass up on that kind of cash. He was bent on saving enough money for Hope's engagement ring. He'd proposed without one on the spur of the moment after making that game-winning basket a month back. In the 5 months they'd been dating, Crispin and Hope hadn't talked about getting married, but the idea crept into Crispin's mind a few days before he popped the question, after they'd seen a movie together where the characters got married on a whim in Las Vegas. "Could you ever see us doing something crazy like that, running off to Vegas?" Crispin asked her on the walk back to the campus from the theater, with his arm around Hope's shoulder to protect her from a chill in the air. "You mean to elope?" she answered, snuggling closer to him. "My parents would kill me. I think my mom's been planning my wedding since the day I was born. But I've got to admit, it was spontaneous. That's a big part of being romantic, keeping things fresh." When they'd started dating, Hope made a point about wanting things to remain casual. "My last boyfriend was really possessive and controlling," she'd told Crispin the 2nd or 3rd time they'd hung out together. "He'd even sneak my cell out of my purse to see who'd been calling me. I just like my freedom now, knowing I'm not boxed into anything." So Crispin in this chapter, he receives his 4th foul, which is not good news for the Trojans because he's the only really tall guy on their team, and it seems like maybe it was a bad call by the refs as well. And then we learn a little bit more about him. We learn that he's not super rich, or he doesn't come from a really wealthy family, because he does have a job that he works at a restaurant called the Flying Sushi, where he does deliveries for them. And not only does he do that, but he also actually attends class and wants to do well in school, it tells us. So very different work ethic from Malcolm, who doesn't have a part-time job and doesn't attend class and who only focuses on basketball. So Crispin has a lot that he is juggling on his plate right now. In addition to that, he also has a girlfriend, now fiance Hope, who he spontaneously proposed to in front of a bunch of people. And so since he spontaneously proposed to her, he does not have a ring for her. So he's also working towards purchasing an engagement ring for her. And we learn a little bit more about their relationship, that it seems like he's very much in love with her. And yes, she really likes him a lot, but she says, her last boyfriend was possessive and controlling, and that she likes her freedom, and she doesn't like to be boxed into anything. So it seems like they have a little bit different take on what their relationship is supposed to look like. She wants her freedom, right? He wants to get married. But from the very beginning of their relationship, Crispin felt like they were meant for each other. He loved Hope's smile and sense of humor. She was the only girl he knew who liked belches and eating beef jerky. And Crispin loved her high-pitched laugh, which made her sound like a little kid. And whenever he heard it, it made him laugh too. Hope didn't seem to care about getting expensive gifts, though her parents were loaded and she used a weekly allowance to treat herself to a lot of designer clothes. Crispin never spent a lot of money on Hope because he didn't have much. His working-class parents couldn't afford to give him a fat allowance. Their dates were mostly to the movies or eating burgers at cheap diners, like Mel's with the old-fashioned soda fountain at the counter. Even when Crispin brought her flowers, he'd usually picked them from some garden himself. So Crispin was shocked when Hope pitched a fit over not getting a diamond engagement ring. He'd seen her have blow-ups before, usually screaming about a professor over a low grade or the cheerleading coach for not featuring her in a particular dance routine. But this was the first one aimed at him. We see that Hope comes from a very different background. She has extremely wealthy parents, and so therefore she wants a really big engagement ring and gets really mad at him over the fact that she doesn't have a large diamond ring on her finger. And we can read between the lines here that it seems like Hope is a little bit spoiled and also has a little bit of a temper problem here. It was on the day after Crispin proposed at the game, once all of the reporters and TV cameras had gotten their feel-good story and disappeared. I talked to my mother this morning, and she's absolutely right. How can I take this marriage proposal seriously without a ring? Said Hope, as they waited to share chef's salad at Mel's. How do I know you're really committed to me, that you won't change your mind in a week and leave me looking like a fool in front of half the country on TMZ and Extra? Hearing that was like a sharp elbow to Crispin's ribs, only this wasn't a basketball game, and he hadn't thought of Hope as the opposition before. Crispin never winced or wiped the sympathetic look off his face. When I asked you to marry me, that was from the heart, not a store, Crispin said calmly, trying to hide his annoyance. He could see that Hope was getting even more upset, shifting around in her chair like she might get up any second and walk out. That scared Crispin. He reached across the table and took her hand, trying to get her to relax. Nearly everyone knew they were engaged. He didn't want to screw it up in less than a day. If it's what you want, I'll get you a ring you can be proud of, he conceded. I'll buy you one of the biggest diamonds you ever saw. That's not the point. It doesn't have to be huge, said Hope with an attitude as if she was looking to pick a fight with Crispin. It just has to show people we're committed to each other. Crispin was completely thrown. What's up with her, he wondered. He was giving Hope what she wanted, but she still wasn't happy. Later that day, they checked out a downtown jewelry store together. Hope didn't see a ring she liked that cost less than $5,000, and Crispin got pissed off at the salesman who kept trying to steer Hope towards the even more expensive rings. It's going to take me at least 5 or 6 months to save up that kind of money, Crispin told her when the salesman moved away to help another customer. You really want to wait that long? If I'm going to wear a ring for the rest of my life, I want it to be the right one, said Hope. I don't want to look at it every day, wishing it was something else. Crispin had already been delivering flying sushi for a few months. At the end of every shift, he'd bring Hope her favorite, an order of eel rolls with seaweed and wasabi on the side. But tonight, Hope told him not to bother, that she'd be grabbing a quick dinner with friends. So we're seeing these cracks in this relationship. We know that they've only been dating here for about 5 months, but Crispin is clearly in love with her, and Hope likes him, but is she in love with him? There's not a lot of evidence there. And she seems to want things out of him that he can't give her. She wants this really expensive ring, but he's a poor college student who's working a job and playing basketball at the same time and trying to do well in school. And so the expectations just aren't realistic on her end, and he's starting to see different sides of her that he's never seen before. As tired as Crispin was from basketball, celebrating, and schoolwork, he was out making deliveries to buy Hope that ring. "Hey, Flying Sushi, win that tournament!" Somebody screamed at him from a passing car. "Go, Troy! Woo!" Crispin hit his horn in response. Beep, beep, beep. He usually had to explain to customers why a nearly 7-foot-tall white kid was delivering Chinese and Japanese food instead of an Asian. "Why not?" was his standard answer. "One of the chefs in our kitchen is short and Mexican." Most people would howl at that response, thinking it was a joke. Only Crispin knew it was absolutely true. But at his first stop, the talk wasn't about any of that. It was all about the NCAA tournament and the Trojans' winning streak. "Think we can keep winning, Sea Rice?" asked the man who answered the door. "It's like a dream come true for this city. My wife and I graduated from Troy almost 10 years ago, but the team was never this good. That fiancée of yours, Hope of Troy, is our good luck charm. Give her a big kiss for me, will you?" Before Crispin left, he posed for a photo with the man's wife and 3 kids, all holding up their fingers in the V sign for victory. Crispin loved every second of it, and his tip was twice what he'd expected. His second stop that afternoon was at a downtown apartment building next to a leather boutique where Hope had once dragged him so she could shop for Italian boots. He chained his moped to a parking meter and climbed the stoop. "Flying Sushi," Crispin said into the intercom before the customer buzzed him inside. By the time he reached the 3rd floor, the tiny elevator that took him upstairs smelled like a combination platter of beef and broccoli and spicy string beans and garlic sauce. The older woman who answered the door looked up at him with her eyes rolling higher and higher, but she didn't seem to know anything about Troy basketball, so there wasn't much conversation. As Crispin waited for the elevator back down, counting his tip, he heard a guy and a girl laughing from inside another apartment. He stood there frozen for an instant, confused, like his body and mind were suddenly in 2 different places. Then he moved closer to that apartment door. The next time Crispin heard them, he was positive the girl's high-pitched laugh belonged to Hope. So this is a very sad end to this chapter because here Crispin is, he's working really hard, trying to save all this money to buy her this expensive engagement ring that she wants that he certainly can't afford. And he hears her laughter behind the door of an apartment, and he hears a guy in there with her. Okay, and so obviously his mind is going to go to, is she cheating on me?